For now, we turn to Matthew Kroenig in Washington. He's a professor at Georgetown University and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Okay, Matthew, so the North is denying Pompeo's claims that these talks were productive. They issued a pretty stern statement about this. You know, the U.S.'s demand for complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization, it doesn't seem that that's something they're agreeing to. Why do you think there's a change in rhetoric on this, and hasn't that always been their goal?
The U.S. goal and the international community's goal has always been the denuclearization of North Korea. I think the North Koreans went into the summit thinking that maybe they could have their cake and eat it too, that they could say some nice words about denuclearization, get relief from international pressure, and keep their nuclear and missile program in the end. And so I'm guessing in these meetings with Pompeo over the past few days, he made it very clear that the United States is serious and that we want to see real concrete progress toward denuclearization. So some of the North Koreans' hopes there may have been dashed.
You know, this was Pompeo's third trip to North Korea. This time, though, he didn't meet with Kim Jong-un. Do you think we should read anything into that?
I wouldn't read too much into that. Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump had a meeting, and then the goal after that was to have follow-on talks to work out the details. And so Pompeo did meet with his counterparts in North Korea at the same level. And so that's kind of what I was expecting to see following the summit, these working-level talks from the real experts and diplomats.
When you're talking about denuclearization, you know, one of the issues they were trying to get at, the U.S. was destroying a missile engine plant. It doesn't seem like they've made progress on that. What do you make of that front?
Well, it's one of the promises that the North Koreans have made, that they would destroy this missile engine site. But there are a lot of other steps the North Koreans are going to have to take as well. And if they're serious about denuclearization, they can take these steps in the coming weeks. Turning over warheads, turning over material for warheads, destroying, dismantling missiles. Many of these steps will not take long. So I think we'll see very soon whether North Korea is serious or whether they were just trying to play us in these negotiations.
And, you know, not just denuclearization. The White House was trying to get back the remains of Americans who were killed in the Korean War that still remain in North Korea. They haven't seemed to make progress on that. I mean, just something as, I wouldn't say simple, but it's not on the level of denuclearization. Why do you think this isn't happening?
Yeah. Well, there's been a meeting scheduled for July 12th that's supposed to be devoted exclusively to this issue of returning the remains of U.S. soldiers during the Korean War that were left in North Korea. So I think we'll have more evidence on that on July 12th. But everybody knew that this was going to take a lot of time, could take a year or more to actually denuclearize North Korea. So I think we should expect it to take time. But again, I think there will be signs about whether or not North Korea is serious in the coming weeks.
I want to switch gears to the president's upcoming NATO summit as meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Here's a listen. I want to play this for you of what he had to say earlier this week.
Then they say, oh, let's see, he's angry at NATO. I guess, yeah, he loves Russia. I love Russia. I will say this, I'm meeting with President Putin next week and getting along, let me tell you, getting along with Russia and getting along with China and getting along with other countries is a good thing. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. You know what? Putin's fine. He's fine. We're all fine. We're people. Will I be prepared? Totally prepared. I've been preparing for this stuff my whole life. They don't say that. They don't say that.
And yet, Matthew, his former National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, had this to say that, according to reports, that the president thinks he can be friends with Putin. I don't know why or why he would want to be. This was reported in the Washington Post. Do you get the sense that the president's being naive about his approach to Putin?
Well, Putin is posing a major challenge to the United States and our allies, invaded Ukraine, intervening in the U.S. election, really doing a lot to destabilize democracies in Western Europe. So he does pose a major challenge. President Trump has talked a lot about trying to improve relations with Russia, as his predecessors have. So I think it's clear to strike the right balance. If there are issues where we have mutual interests, it makes sense to cooperate. But we also have to be clear-eyed about the challenge that Russia poses. And if you look at beyond the rhetoric to the Trump administration's policy, they have been tough against Russia in several areas. So They've increased defense spending for NATO. They struck Russia's partner Assad in Syria. And so the policy has been a little bit more complicated than I think the rhetoric would suggest.
Okay, it's definitely complicated, but what would you say, Matthew, would be a win for the United States if the president were to come out of this meeting? Is there something tangible and concrete that the president could say, hey, I got this out of Russia?
Well, one thing that would be helpful would get Russia to return to compliance with some of its arms control commitments. So the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty has been a successful treaty since 1987. Russia is now violating that treaty. Another possibility would be extending the New START treaty that was negotiated by President Obama. It's a 5-year agreement with the possibility of renewal. And so renewing that for another 5 years, I think, would be both in the United States and in Russia's interest. So those are kind of tangible things that I think may be realistic to achieve in a meeting like this.
You know, the president is right about, when he talks about NATO, he says that there aren't enough nations paying their share in defense spending. But past presidents have also made the same complaint. What's the difference in the approach that Mr. Trump has taken to handling this particular issue?
Yes. So NATO is an alliance of 28 countries, but in reality, the United States has always provided the bulk of the military power. So U.S. presidents since Eisenhower have been asking European countries to spend more to contribute military forces. The goal is that each country contribute 2% of their GDP to defense spending. Only 4 or 5 of the 28 members are doing that right now. So they are shirking their commitments and they need to do more. The Trump administration's approach has been different, though, in that he's been much more forceful and I think in the rhetoric much more confrontational in asking the Europeans to do more. And so that's, on one hand, I think ruffling a lot of feathers and rubbing people the wrong way. On the other hand, many European countries have begun to increase spending because of this pressure from Trump.
All right, Matthew Kroenig, thank you for joining us.